The gravel crunched beneath their tires like it used to under mine. I stood behind the garden trellis, hands in the pockets of my linen apron, watching one polished car after another pull up the old drive. Mercedes, Tesla, BMW, all gleaming like the people inside them. The lake shimmered in the morning sun, the same way it always had, but everything else was different now. Everything had changed, except them. They say if you've ever been betrayed by family, hitting like brings peace, subscribing brings clarity, and commenting brings karma to those who wronged you. Try it, and tell me where you're watching from. Anyways. Wow, said Cousin Tricia, stepping out in platform wedges and oversized sunglasses. This place doesn't even smell like mold anymore. Her husband, Greg, grunted as he unloaded 3 Louis Vuitton bags. Smells like lavender and money. Aunt Meredith climbed out of her car next, fanning herself with a brochure I'd printed and mailed out months ago. She wore pastel slacks and carried a monogrammed tote with her initials stitched in gold. It's about time someone fixed up this old dump, Aunt Meredith said. I didn't flinch. I'd heard her voice in my head for years, saying that same thing every time I repainted the porch or scrubbed mildew out of the beams. But hearing it in person was different. Her words bounced off the cedar siding like they belonged to someone else's home. No one asked who had done the fixing. They didn't notice the row of fresh planters or the handmade stepping stones etched with wildflowers and initials, mine. They didn't notice the birdhouse I carved from Grandma's old spice rack, now nestled in the birch tree she loved. They didn't recognize the porch swing, reupholstered with a quilt I'd sewn from her old scarves. They didn't recognize me, which was the plan. I stepped out from behind the trellis slowly, walking toward the welcome table like I was just part of the staff. A woman in khakis and a Stillwater Retreat polo shirt smiled at me and whispered, "Want me to handle check-in?" I shook my head. "No, it's fine. I've got it." I'd chosen not to use my last name on any of the signage. Just Lena. Just me. At the table, I offered the guests their room keys, each one tied to a smooth piece of lake stone with their room names engraved by hand. The Trillium Room, the Aspen Loft, the Helen Suite. No one looked at my face. Not really. Uncle Dave took the key from me and said, "Thanks, sweetheart. Can we get extra towels this time? Last year's setup was a nightmare." "There was no reunion last year," I said softly. Uncle Dave laughed. "Well, whenever it was. You know what I mean." Cousin Marcus strolled up next, drink already in hand. "Hey, do we get meal service now? Or are we fending for ourselves again? I don't cook on vacation." "We have curated meals scheduled," I replied. He raised an eyebrow. "Fancy. Who runs this place now?" Before I could answer, Aunt Meredith leaned toward him and said, "I hope it's not that weird caretaker lady again. What was her name? Linda? Lorna?" "Lena," said Cousin Tricia, scrunching her nose. She was so awkward, like always watching from the kitchen like a ghost. They laughed. I didn't. A breeze moved through the porch, stirring the corner of the welcome banner I'd hung the night before. It read, "Stillwater Retreat, where quiet comes home." Tricia looked around and sighed. "Okay, whoever's running this thing now at least has taste. I'll give them that." I handed her a key. She didn't look at me when she took it. Inside, they began claiming spaces with the confidence of people who never thought to ask permission. They tossed their bags on beds, opened bottles of wine they hadn't paid for, and plopped themselves onto restored leather furniture that still creaked from decades of memories. My memories. Cousin Marcus wandered into the library and shouted, "Who's reading all this poetry crap now?" "Emily Dickinson? Seriously?" I pressed my lips together. The shelf he was pointing at held Grandma's favorite books. I'd alphabetized them by hand. Uncle Dave flipped a light switch and said, "New fixtures." Huh, must have cost a fortune. Hope it wasn't out of our trust. There is no trust, said Trisha, rolling her eyes. That place probably went bankrupt years ago. We're lucky we still get to use it. She was right about one thing. They were lucky, but not in the way they thought. Dinner that evening was scheduled for 6. I set the long outdoor table myself. Plates pressed with Lakehouse etchings, linen napkins folded in the style Grandma always used, a small bouquet of fresh mint and lavender from the garden in every glass. The chairs were all mismatched on purpose, just like they used to be. As I lit the candles down the center of the table, I overheard Uncle Dave talking to his son. Place looks like one of those wellness retreat things. You think they're turning it into a rental? Cousin Marcus snorted. Nah, we'd know. I mean, this is still the family's, right? No one told me different, said Uncle Dave. They better not be charging us, said Trisha as she walked past. I swear, if I see a bill, I'm calling a lawyer. I smiled without smiling. They assumed this was all still theirs. They assumed they belonged here. But that's what happens when you walk through someone else's labor like it's your inheritance. You forget you were gone. As the sun began to dip behind the pines, the golden light touched every corner of the deck. The lake beyond sparkled in silence. The house looked exactly like what I had always dreamed it could be. Peaceful, timeless, whole. And they were sitting inside it like they owned the moment. I remained in the background, quietly making sure everything ran smoothly, refilling glasses, adjusting table settings, checking room comfort. Every time someone looked at me, it was with vague recognition. The way you'd glance at a waitress you tipped once in a town you barely remember. No one asked where I'd been. No one said my name. At one point, Trisha stood in the doorway and called out, "Hey, sorry, what's your name again? The person who's running the show?" I turned to face her fully, but before I could speak, Marcus shouted from behind her, "Just call her house manager or something. Works for me." She nodded. "House manager it is." I didn't correct her, because this wasn't the moment for that. Not yet. Instead, I went back to folding napkins and brushing crumbs off the entryway rug. I passed by the fireplace, the stone one I rebuilt from the ground up, and reached down to adjust a crooked photograph. It was one of the only surviving ones of Grandma Helen smiling beside the lake. The frame had a plaque I engraved myself. "Stillwater belongs to those who listen." But they didn't even notice the photo. They were too busy pouring wine, gossiping about stock options, and talking about who in the family had made it this year. Made it. I stood silently by the side door, listening to every word. "Trisha's youngest is already learning coding," said Aunt Meredith. "She's only 7. Marcus got a new promotion, big firm in Chicago," said Greg. "We should take a family photo while everyone's here," said Dave. "Maybe in front of the boathouse." "Yeah," said Marcus. "Just crop out the help." The candle flames flickered, and something in me hardened, not with anger, but with finality. I looked around that house, at the wood panels I sanded with raw fingers, the drapes I hand-stitched, the tiles I laid while crying at midnight when no one showed up to help. They walked through it like tourists, loud, careless, blind, but I didn't need them to see it. I needed them to be here, because tomorrow I was going to say it, but not tonight. Tonight, I let them think I was invisible, because it made what was coming even better. They didn't even say my name. But this time I wasn't invisible. I was the owner. It was spring. the last real spring we all had together. Grandma had made French toast from scratch. Her secret was soaking the bread in the egg mixture overnight, cinnamon heavy and with a pinch of cardamom. The kitchen smelled like Saturday mornings and childhood, the kind of scent that wraps around your ribs and makes you believe, just for a moment, that you're safe. We were all gathered around the long table in the sunroom, the one overlooking the lake. Sunlight poured in, catching dust motes midair. The water outside shimmered. I remember thinking how still everything looked, except me. I had a decision sitting heavy on my chest, and it was time to speak. I cleared my throat. "I've made a choice," I said. "I'm going to stay here, full time, with Grandma." There was a beat of silence. Then, Aunt Meredith raised one perfect brow and said, "You're going to do what?" "I'm moving in," I said, "to help. She needs someone here every day." Cousin Tricia choked on her mimosa and laughed. "Wait, what? You're giving up your job for this?" Uncle Dave blinked. "But you just finished your degree, didn't you?" "I did," I said, "but that can wait. She can't." Aunt Meredith leaned back in her wicker chair and sighed. "You're too smart to be a live-in nurse in the woods, Lena." I kept my face neutral. "I'm not being a nurse," I said. "I'm being a granddaughter." Cousin Marcus shook his head and muttered, "Emotional blackmail." Classic. I opened my mouth, but Tricia cut in, voice sweet and sharp as honey laced with vinegar. "Oh, come on," said Cousin Tricia. "She just wants to inherit the Lakehouse. Don't get too comfy." Everyone laughed, even Greg, who barely knew which fork to use. I didn't laugh. I looked across the table at Grandma Helen. Her eyes didn't leave mine. They were soft and wet with gratitude, though her mouth stayed quiet. She didn't speak much anymore, especially in front of the others, but I felt her approval like a hand on my shoulder. I swallowed the heat in my chest and forced a smile. "No one's trying to take anything," I said. "She just needs help." Aunt Meredith waved her fork. "If she needs help, we can arrange proper care. A professional. You don't need to throw your life away." "It's not throwing it away," I said. "It's choosing how I want to live it." Uncle Dave chuckled and reached for another slice of toast. "You'll regret it when you're 35 and broke with nothing on your resume but sponge baths and crossword puzzles." No one came to my defense. No one asked Grandma what she wanted. Later that day, when they all left, hugging perfunctorily, promising to come back soon, I stayed behind and helped Grandma out of her chair. She was quiet as we moved through the house, but when we got to the porch, she patted my hand. Grandma Helen said, "They don't see you now, but one day they'll understand." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That summer, the phone barely rang. At first, I kept the guest calendar by the fridge, writing down who said they'd visit. Meredith, August. Dave and Marcus, maybe June. Tricia. Depends on Coachella. None of them came. By the end of July, I stopped writing down names. I bought a whiteboard instead, for medication schedules, blood pressure readings, glucose logs. I started meal prepping in bulk, installed grab bars in the bathroom, got used to sitting through endless calls with insurance reps who didn't care that Grandma was more than a case number. I gave up the job offers in Denver and Portland, declined the interview at the design firm I'd dreamed about since I was 16. Instead, I learned how to lift someone twice my weight without hurting their back or mine. I figured out how to reorder prescriptions without delay. I became fluent in the language of quiet grief, how to smile through exhaustion, how to soothe the small tremors of age with lavender lotion and soft lullabies at night. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't Instagram-worthy, but it was sacred. We had our routines. In the mornings, she liked to sit by the lake with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. I'd make her tea, black, with milk, and we'd listen to the loons call out across the water. Some days we talked, other days we just sat, letting time roll by without urgency. "Do you miss them?" I asked once, referring to the rest of the family. Grandma Helen looked out at the lake for a long moment. Then she said, "I miss who they were, not who they've become." I nodded. I knew what she meant. Holidays were the hardest. That first Thanksgiving, I roasted a chicken instead of a turkey, just for the two of us. I set the table with her good china, polished the silver, even made her favorite cranberry sauce with orange zest. She smiled through the meal, but her eyes kept drifting toward the window. She was waiting for something, someone, but no one came. Christmas was quieter. No cards from Meredith, no phone calls from Trisha, not even a text from Marcus, who lived 2 hours away. I wrapped her gifts in newspaper and twine. She opened them slowly, gloves I'd knitted, a music box that played Moon River, a new set of pajamas with little sailboats printed on the sleeves. "I love them," Grandma said. "I wish there were more," I told her. She reached across the blanket and squeezed my hand. "There's enough," she said. "There's more than enough." But some nights were hard, when the coughing wouldn't stop, when she forgot where she was, when her pain got so sharp, I'd hear her cry through the walls and have to run barefoot across cold tile in the dark. There were nights I cried too, curled on the floor outside her door, afraid of what morning might bring. My friends slowly stopped checking in. Their lives moved forward. Engagements, promotions, cross-country moves. I watched it all unfold on social media from the same couch I'd sat on since high school. I missed things. Birthdays, baby showers, art shows, nights out. I missed myself sometimes. But every time I thought about leaving, I thought about that spring morning, about that table, about how they all laughed, and how she didn't. She never laughed at me. She saw me. Every Sunday, she'd ask me to read aloud from her favorite book of poetry. I'd sit on the edge of her bed and recite lines until she dozed off, her fingers curled around mine like petals. It became a ritual. Her breath would slow. The room would grow still, and in that silence, I would feel it, that I had made the right choice. Not because it was easy, not because it was noble, but because it was ours. I learned how to unclog sinks, replace shingles, sew curtains, prune apple trees. I learned the rhythm of caretaking, not the kind that gets applause, but the kind that keeps a person whole. No one saw it, but she did. She always did. And sometimes that was enough. One night, during a storm, the power went out. The house was pitch black. I lit every candle I could find, then curled up beside her on the couch wrapped in quilts. We listened to the rain on the roof. She reached for my hand and whispered, "You're the best thing I ever made." I didn't say anything. I just held her hand tighter. That moment wasn't for words. They had all laughed, scoffed, dismissed me like a silly girl chasing a fantasy or a free house. But they never understood. It was never about the house. It was about the woman inside it. The woman who remembered my birthday when no one else did. Who taught me how to float in the lake. Who made me feel like I was never too much and never not enough. I didn't stay for the Lakehouse. I stayed because she was the only one who saw me. She passed in her sleep. I had made her tea that night, tucked the wool blanket around her legs, and read a few pages from her favorite poems. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that tells you everything without saying a word. I kissed her forehead, turned on the fan, and turned off the lamp. That was the last time I saw her eyes open. The next morning, she didn't come to breakfast. I brought the tray to her bedside anyway, just in case. But her hands were still. Her chest was still. The tea cooled untouched. I stood there for a long time, long enough for the birds outside to stop singing, long enough for the sound of the clock ticking to become unbearable. I didn't cry right away. I just placed the tray on the dresser and whispered, "Thank you." The days after were blurred pages, phone calls, funeral home meetings, forms and legal signatures. I kept the ceremony simple, just like she wanted. No elaborate speeches, no open casket, just a white rose on her pillow, a reading by the lake, and a soft breeze that carried her spirit where it belonged. Aunt Meredith arrived in a cream suit, wearing pearls that clacked every time she folded her arms. Tricia cried at the ceremony, loudly, but spent most of the reception scrolling her phone and whispering to Greg about the musty smell. Uncle Dave stayed for half an hour, then muttered something about traffic and left early. No one asked how I was holding up. They just kept saying, "She was lucky to have you," as if that erased everything. A week later, I got the call from her lawyer, Mr. Farnsworth. He was in his 70s, soft-spoken, and always wore bow ties that didn't match his suits. He said, "Lena, I'd like you to come in for the reading of the will. The others will be present." I said, "Others?" He said, "Your aunt, your uncle, your cousins. They've all been notified." I hesitated. "Okay," I said. "I'll be there." We met in a stuffy conference room with a long cherrywood table and a bowl of dusty mints. Mr. Farnsworth shuffled papers, cleared his throat, and began reading. The will was short, uncomplicated. To my surprise, Grandma had already divided her small savings, a modest amount of cash split evenly among the extended family. No jewelry, no stock, no secret nest eggs. And then came the final line. Mr. Farnsworth said, "To my granddaughter Lena, who gave me the gift of time, I leave the Lakehouse, Stillwater, in full. My wish is for her to do something beautiful with it." The room went silent. Uncle Dave was the first to speak. He stood so fast his chair screeched against the floor. Uncle Dave shouted, "She manipulated an old woman." Mr. Farnsworth said calmly, "It was a notarized decision made 2 years ago in full health." Aunt Meredith folded her arms and glared at me. "This is absurd. That house is a family property. It's not hers to hoard." "She lived there," I said quietly. "She wanted me to have it." Tricia's voice cracked as she said, "Are you kidding me? She gets the house? I gave up 2 weekends to help organize photo albums and you—" Greg grabbed her shoulder, trying to calm her, but she pulled away and wiped her eyes. "She always liked you more," Tricia said. "Everyone knew." I looked at her, not with anger, just sadness. "She loved all of us," I said, "but only one of us stayed." Aunt Meredith snapped, "Don't get smug. This isn't over. I'll have my lawyer look into contesting this. You're not walking away with the family's legacy without a fight." I didn't reply. I simply stood, thanked Mr. Farnsworth, and walked out the door. I didn't go home that night. I drove instead, out past the cornfields, over the hills, all the way to a small coastal town where Grandma once took me when I was 12. I checked into a cheap motel, bought a notebook at a gas station, and wrote. I wrote everything I felt, the grief, the guilt, the aching silence in the house, the echo of her slippers on the floor, the smell of her lavender lotion that still clung to the pillowcases. But underneath it all was something else, a pulse of something steady, quiet, purpose. She had trusted me. She had believed in me when no one else did. She gave me the house, but more than that, she gave me a direction. Her note was short, folded inside a book of pressed flowers I found under her bed. It said, "You gave me the gift of time. Now I'm giving you the gift of space." This is yours now. Do something beautiful with it. Love, Grandma. I read it until the ink blurred. The next few years were quiet ones. I stayed out of sight, out of social media, out of family drama, out of everything. But I was working. I took online classes in sustainable design. I learned about permaculture, natural light, insulation, and reclaimed wood. I started freelancing, doing odd jobs, web design, landscaping blueprints, anything to earn just enough while putting everything else into restoring the house. Stillwater became my canvas. I tore out the moldy carpet, sanded the floors, opened up the walls to let the light in. I built bookshelves from barnwood and made a tiny meditation room where the pantry used to be. I planted herbs, wildflowers, and stone paths through the garden. I painted the door Grandma's favorite color, a pale sage green she once said reminded her of spring. Bit by bit, it became something new, something sacred, something mine. I didn't reach out to the family, and they didn't reach out to me. I figured they were still angry, or embarrassed, or both, but honestly, I didn't care. Stillwater was becoming a place of healing, and not just for me. Eventually, I listed it, quietly, as a small retreat for writers and artists. No big advertising, just word of mouth, a few blog mentions, a whisper in the right circles. People came, burned out teachers, divorced poets, grieving daughters. They stayed in the same rooms where I used to sit with Grandma. They drank tea on the porch. They cried by the lake. They said the silence felt like medicine. One guest left a note that said, "I don't know what this place is, but I've never felt more seen." I kept that note on the fridge. And then, one morning as I was pruning the lavender, my phone buzzed. An email. Subject line: Family reunion. Summer gathering at the Lakehouse. I blinked. It was a group message, from Trisha, no less, sent to about a dozen family members, including me. The body of the email read, "Hi everyone. We're hoping to bring back the tradition of our big summer family reunion at the Lakehouse this year. Everyone missed it so much. We're planning games, catered meals, even a slideshow of old photos. Dates, June 23rd to 26th. Location, Stillwater, assuming it's still available. Can someone confirm access to the house? We'll need someone local to help with logistics. Trisha." I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just smiled. They didn't know they were asking me. So I said yes. The week before they arrived, I polished every window until it reflected the lake like glass. I scrubbed the cedar decks, trimmed the garden paths, and rehung the handmade swing that used to creak just right at sunset. I pressed the linens with lavender water, folded every towel with a sprig of mint tucked neatly into the fold, just the way Grandma liked it. In the Helen suite, I placed her hairbrush, her old floral mug, and a photograph of her as a young girl on the vanity. Not for show, for presence, her presence. Stillwater didn't need decoration. It needed memory. And that's what I gave it. I made the house immaculate. I didn't hire a staff. No chefs, no cleaners, no greeters. I wanted them to see the house. But more than that, I wanted to see them. Not as a servant, not as a guest, but as a witness. The first car pulled up Friday afternoon. It was a rented black SUV. Trisha and Greg stepped out, already bickering over who forgot the snacks. "Do you see a welcome sign?" Trisha asked. Greg said, "I thought you said someone was greeting us." Trisha waved a hand in my direction. "Maybe it's that girl, the one by the porch." I stood on the steps, clipboard in hand, hair tied back. I wore simple linen pants and a dark green blouse. Not a uniform, not a disguise, just enough to blend in. Trisha approached with narrowed eyes. "Hi," said Trisha. "We're here for the Stillwater family weekend, the Harrisons." I smiled. "Welcome. You're in the Birch room." Trisha frowned. "Why are there room names?" I handed her the room key attached to a lake stone etched with a hand-drawn birch leaf. She took it, but didn't say thank you. Greg looked around the porch. "This place looks different." Trisha muttered, "Too different." "Are those new railings?" "They are," I said. Trisha pointed toward the garden. "And what's with all the herbs? Looks like someone tried to turn this into a yoga commune." "It's a quiet retreat," I said. "For now." She gave me a look like I'd just offered her boiled kale. Greg asked, "Is there Wi-Fi?" "Yes," I said, "but no streaming after 10 p.m. Quiet hours begin then." Trisha blinked. "Why is there a freaking check-in time at our own Lakehouse?" I smiled. "All guests follow the same check-in policies." She snorted. "Whatever." By nightfall, 5 more cars arrived. Uncle Dave showed up in a golf hat and took issue with the no smoking near the dock policy. Cousin Marcus and his girlfriend pouted over the lack of a hot tub. Aunt Meredith brought a full set of monogrammed towels and insisted we replace the ones provided because they were too rustic. The chalkboard near the entryway listed weekend guidelines, meal times, designated quiet hours, and an optional guided walk around the grounds. No one read the fine print. No one looked past their expectations. "This place used to be cozy," said Uncle Dave as he sipped from the complimentary lemon water. "Now it's like a spa run by librarians." Marcus laughed. "It's all so curated, like someone tried to make it go viral." No one asked who did it. No one wondered why it had changed. They just assumed someone else was running the show, some anonymous property manager, or worse, a company. I moved silently among them, pouring wine, replacing linens, answering questions without revealing answers. They called me Miss, or Hey You, or Can you grab an extra blanket? They didn't greet me by name. At one point, Meredith approached me with a clipboard of her own. "Do you know who's in charge?" asked Aunt Meredith. I looked at her evenly. "I'm part of the operations." "Figures," said Aunt Meredith. "Tell the owner we need more soap in the Magnolia bathroom. It smells like patchouli in there." "I'll take care of it," I said. She gave a tight nod. "Also, why does every room have a diffuser? It's a bit much." "Guests find it calming," I said. She rolled her eyes. "This isn't a meditation retreat. It's a family home." I tilted my head. "Is it?" She didn't respond. That evening, I watched them gather in the great room, lounging on the same reupholstered furniture they used to complain about. They gossiped about coworkers and investments and passive income streams. Someone complained about gluten in the bread. Someone else asked if there'd be a projector for the slideshow. Not once did anyone look up at the photograph wall. Not once did anyone say, "Who curated this?" But it was all there. Every frame, every brushstroke, every choice whispered Grandma's name. And mine. I walked the house that night after they'd gone to bed, made sure the fireplaces were out, the doors locked, the kettle cleaned. In the Helen suite, I paused by the window. Her music box sat open on the dresser. I wound it once, softly, and let it play for no one. She would have laughed at all this. Not cruelly, just knowingly. She'd have sat on the porch swing, sipping her tea, saying, "Let them come, sweetheart. Let them come and show you who they really are." I smiled, because they were doing exactly that. Saturday morning came with fog. The lake was wrapped in mist and birds chirped cautiously, like they knew something was about to shift. Breakfast was served in baskets, locally sourced pastries, fruit, and tea. Cousin Marcus complained. Where's the bacon and eggs? Trisha snapped. I don't even see oat milk. What kind of retreat doesn't do alt options? Uncle Dave grunted. Feels like we're in a vegan cult. I made no comment. The chalkboard at the entryway listed the day's schedule. 9:30 a.m., nature walk. 12 p.m., lakeside lunch. 2 p.m., free time. 7 p.m., family dinner. Formal seating, guest speaker. They read it, barely, but that last line stuck. Trisha narrowed her eyes. Guest speaker? Who? Greg shrugged. Probably some local historian, or like a mindfulness coach. Or a ghost whisperer, Marcus muttered. Is it that girl? Asked Aunt Meredith, pointing vaguely toward me. No idea, said Dave. She hasn't said 2 words to me since we got here. She doesn't seem very professional, Trisha said. I like her, said Greg. She's quiet. Exactly, said Trisha. Too quiet. Weird vibe. I continued setting the table for dinner. White linen, candles, a printed menu at each place setting. At the top of the menu, it read, Stillwater Family Dinner, honoring our past, celebrating our present guest reflection. Lena. I placed each one carefully. No one read them yet. They were too busy deciding who would sit where, who brought the best wine, who had the funniest story about Grandma's cat. I kept my hands steady. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about recognition. Not from them, from myself. At sunset, I stood at the edge of the dock, watching the lake catch fire in the golden light. I heard laughter behind me, the clinking of glasses, familiar voices in unfamiliar tones. They thought they knew this place, but the version of Stillwater they remembered was gone. This one was mine, built with calloused hands, painted with sleepless nights, rooted in sacrifice, watered with silence. And tomorrow, they'd know it. They were about to meet me, really meet me. I chose the necklace carefully. It wasn't flashy, just a small silver pendant shaped like a pine cone, something Grandma Helen gave me the Christmas I turned 16. She'd said, It's simple, like you, and stronger than it looks. I hadn't worn it in years, but tonight, it felt right. I buttoned the last pearl on my blouse, tied my hair back, and walked down the hall toward the dining room, my steps slow and certain. From the doorway, I saw them all gathered, eating, drinking, talking over each other like always. The long table flickered with candlelight. My menu cards were scattered, some used as coasters. My name printed on top of each one. No one had noticed. Until now. I stepped inside. A hush didn't fall immediately. At first it was just a flicker. A few eyes turned, a few brows furrowed. Then Trisha leaned across the table and whispered, Why is she even talking? I didn't let it land. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table, her chair, the one Grandma always used, and stood behind it, calm, collected. I rested my hands on the carved wood, then looked around the room. They waited, confused, curious, slightly annoyed. Good evening, I said. For those of you who don't recognize me, my name is Lena, and I own Stillwater Retreat. Silence. Someone's fork clinked against their plate. Trisha sat back, blinking fast. Uncle Dave said, Wait, what? I took a slow breath. I own this property, I said. I've owned it since Grandma Helen passed. No, said Trisha, her voice brittle. That's not possible. It was her decision, I said. She left the Lakehouse to me in her will, entirely, without conditions. Greg looked at Trisha, then at me, then back down at his plate. No one told us, said Aunt Meredith, sounding almost offended. You were there, I said, at the reading. Uncle Dave rubbed his face and muttered, We thought you'd sell it, or just sit on it. I didn't, I said. I rebuilt it. I turned it into a retreat. Every single inch you've walked through this weekend, Every meal, every room, every framed photograph, that was me. Cousin Marcus stared at his wine glass like it might provide an answer. I turned and pointed toward the gallery wall. "If you'll come with me," I said, "I'd like to show you something." They followed hesitantly, shuffling, murmuring, glancing at each other like schoolchildren caught mid-prank. The hallway lights glowed softly along the freshly polished floors. At the end, the photo wall spanned an entire side of the corridor, clean white frames in varied sizes, arranged like a constellation of memory. I raised my hand and pointed to the center photo. It was Grandma Helen sitting in the porch swing, holding my hand. Both of us were laughing. Her eyes nearly closed in the moment, her chin tipped toward the sun. "This was taken a month before she passed," I said. "I set the timer myself." No one spoke. "She was the one who asked me to take it," I said. "She said she wanted proof that joy still lived here, that love had stayed." Aunt Meredith cleared her throat but said nothing. I reached toward the credenza beneath the photos and picked up the leather-bound book. "This is the restoration journal," I said. I logged every decision, every floorboard I replaced, every window I salvaged, every coat of paint. I opened the pages, handwritten entries, blueprints, fabric swatches, a pressed daisy, a stained ring from a coffee mug. Cousin Tricia frowned. "You did all this by yourself?" "I hired help when needed," I said. "But the vision was mine. The hands were mine." Uncle Dave shook his head slowly. "Why didn't you tell us?" "You weren't asking," I said. "You were assuming." I set the journal down and picked up the binder beside it. "These are the business plans," I said. "Permits, legal documents, branding, marketing, guest policies, sustainable practices, tax documents." I let that sink in. Then I lifted the final book, a deep navy blue with gold trim. "This," I said, "is the guest book." I handed it to Marcus. He opened it reluctantly, then started reading aloud. "This place saved me. I arrived shattered and left whole. A haven for the forgotten, a home for the hurting. Thank you to whoever dreamed this into being. You've given strangers a place to belong." Marcus looked up at me. "You did all this?" "Yes," I said. "No apology, no bragging, just fact." I looked around the group. Their faces had shifted, some flushed with embarrassment, others pale with realization. Greg looked like he wanted to clap but didn't dare. Meredith's lips were pursed so tight they nearly disappeared. "You all thought I stayed to take," I said. "But I stayed to give." Tricia's voice cracked. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "Because it wasn't about you," I said. "It was about her, and me, and this house." Uncle Dave crossed his arms. "Feels like you were waiting to drop this on us." "No," I said. "I was waiting to see if any of you would recognize me." No one spoke. I turned and walked back toward the dining room. The candles were still burning, the glasses still half full, the chair at the head of the table still waiting. I paused there, one hand on the back of the seat. "I made this place what it is," I said. "You've all enjoyed it for the past 2 days. Now you know who made it possible." Aunt Meredith said quietly, "We didn't mean to." I cut her off gently. "I'm not here for apologies." Tricia stood. "Then what are you here for?" I looked her in the eyes. "Closure." And then I walked past them, down the hall, out the front door, onto the porch that held the memories they didn't earn. The wind kissed my face. The lake shimmered in moonlight. Somewhere a loon called. Inside, no one moved. No one followed. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life, because this was my home now. The sky was still streaked with soft indigo when I heard the door open behind me. Footsteps creaked across the porch. I didn't turn around. I was standing at the railing, looking out at the lake, the water calm, the horizon golden at the edges. The loons had gone quiet. Even the wind was holding its breath. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. It was Aunt Meredith. She stepped up beside me stiffly, her arms crossed, pearls tight around her neck like they were holding her upright. "You could have told us," said Aunt Meredith. "We were family." I kept my eyes on the water. I said, "Family shows up." "You didn't." She exhaled sharply, almost a laugh. "We were busy. We had our own lives." "I know," I said. "And you let us walk around this house all weekend like strangers," said Aunt Meredith. "You were strangers," I replied. "To the house. And to me." She opened her mouth to speak again, but the words never came. Instead, she turned and walked back inside. The next to appear was Trisha. She came out more cautiously, wrapping her cardigan tight around her, like the night might judge her more harshly than I would. She sat on the porch step, not beside me, just close enough. For a minute, she said nothing. Then Trisha said, "We were just kids back then." I finally turned. "You were 26, I said, "old enough to know how to dial a phone." Trisha looked down at her hands. I didn't know how sick she was. "She missed you," I said. "Every birthday, every Thanksgiving, every time someone else didn't show." "I didn't think it mattered," said Trisha. "You were there." "That's exactly why it mattered," I said, "because I was the only one." She blinked fast, trying to keep her eyes dry. Trisha said, "It just didn't seem fair that she gave it all to you." "It wasn't about fairness," I said. "It was about presence." Trisha whispered, "She could have warned us." "She didn't owe you that," I said. "And neither did I." By the time I walked back inside, the others had gathered in the great room. The candles had burned low. The air smelled faintly of rosemary and melted wax. They were seated in a loose half-circle, Meredith, Dave, Marcus, Greg, their postures stiff, their expressions unreadable. I stepped into the center of the room and stood still, letting the silence do its work. Cousin Marcus leaned forward. "So what now?" asked Marcus. "You're kicking us out?" "No," I said. "You're here through the weekend. You'll finish what you started." Uncle Dave scoffed. "You get some kind of pleasure out of this?" I tilted my head. "I get peace." He frowned. "That's not what I meant." "But it's what I found," I said. "In this house, in the quiet, in the work. You all thought I stayed to take something. I stayed because I was needed, and because it mattered." Greg spoke softly. "It's a beautiful place." I nodded. "It is." Meredith crossed her arms again. "So that's it?" asked Aunt Meredith. "You're turning your back on the family?" "I'm setting boundaries," I said. "This house is open to guests, but it's not open to entitlement." Trisha frowned. "We're not entitled." I raised an eyebrow. "You assumed the Lakehouse still belonged to you," I said. "You made plans without asking. You treated me like staff. You joked about me in front of my face." Greg winced. Marcus looked away. "No one asked who designed the retreat," I said. "No one noticed the changes, or the memories I preserved. No one even said my name." Meredith shifted in her chair. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing," I said. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for clarity." Dave grunted. "You made your point." "It's not a point," I said. "It's a reality." I stepped over to the bookshelf and ran my fingers across the spines, each one chosen with intention, each one placed by hand. "This house is no longer a family home," I said. "It's a sanctuary, a business, a space for restoration." Trisha said quietly, "For strangers." "For those who show up," I said. "Who listen, who notice." Greg nodded. more to himself than anyone. Meredith looked tired now, older somehow. "So what happens after this weekend?" asked Aunt Meredith. "You go back to your lives," I said. "And I continue mine." Marcus looked up. "We're not welcome back?" "You're welcome to apply like any guest," I said. "But the door doesn't swing on nostalgia anymore." They didn't speak after that. And I didn't stay. I left them there, in the stillness they never understood. I walked down to the dock barefoot. The boards were cool beneath my feet. The lake lapped gently at the shore. Somewhere across the water, a frog croaked once and fell silent. I stood at the edge, hands in my pockets, and looked up at the stars. Above me, the sky was vast and velvet and full of things that never needed permission to shine. I thought of Grandma, how she used to hum when she gardened, how she lined the windowsills with little glass jars of jam, how she'd always smile just before she spoke, like her words had already been warmed in her heart before they reached her mouth. She chose me. Not because I was special, but because I stayed. And now I was choosing peace. Not because it was easy, but because it was mine. I closed my eyes and let the quiet fill me. Not the empty kind, the kind that means something, the kind that breathes. I didn't just inherit the house. I inherited the silence, and I made it sing. They were gone by Sunday morning. No dramatic exits, no slammed doors, just a slow trickle of goodbyes delivered with half-formed smiles and suitcases that rolled too loudly across the gravel. Some muttered, "Thank you." Others avoided my gaze entirely. Uncle Dave left a note folded into his untouched breakfast basket. "Still don't agree with how it happened, but the place looks good." Cousin Marcus didn't say goodbye at all, just sent a shrugging emoji in a group chat no one had used in years. Greg shook my hand. I could tell he meant it. "You built something real," said Greg. "That's rare." "Thank you," I said. Trisha hugged me. It was stiff, hesitant, not performative, just uncertain. She didn't say a word, just handed me a small bouquet of white daisies tied with a brown silk ribbon. Later that afternoon, I placed the flowers gently in a vase and left them in the guest cottage, on the nightstand next to a handwritten note that read, "May peace find you when you stop chasing everything else." 2 days passed. The house exhaled. I aired out the rooms, changed the sheets, swept the decks, wiped the fingerprints from the sliding doors. Still water returned to silence, its truest form. That's when the emails began. Not many, just a few lines here and there. Cousin Lila wrote, "I had no idea what you went through. Thank you for giving her what none of us did." Greg followed with, "If you ever want to teach a course on quiet leadership, I'll be your first student." From Trisha, "Sorry for being cruel back then. I didn't get it. I think I do now. The house, it feels like her." There was no email from Aunt Meredith, none from Uncle Dave. That was fine. Apologies weren't a currency I needed anymore. Midweek, a new message came through the inquiry form on the Stillwater website. The sender's name was Camille. "I'm burnt out. I just need quiet. I don't want to talk. I don't want to explain. I just want to breathe somewhere that doesn't ask anything of me. Do you have space?" I sat with her words for a moment, then smiled. This was why I rebuilt the house, not to prove anything, not even to preserve something, but to offer what had once been given to me. Room to be seen without being evaluated. Room to be loved without being loud. I wrote back, "We have space and silence and a room by the lake that smells like lavender. Come whenever you're ready." The next morning, I found Grandma's letter again. It was where I always kept it, tucked between pages of a poetry collection in the Helen Suite. I sat on the porch, the air warm with early summer, the letter soft in my hands. The paper still held the faintest trace of her lavender lotion. Faded now, but unmistakable. Her handwriting curved gently across the page. You gave me the gift of time. Now I'm giving you the gift of space. This is yours now. Do something beautiful with it. I read it slowly, as if for the first time. The weight of it was no longer heavy. It was grounding. A dragonfly landed on the armrest beside me. It stayed just long enough for me to notice how its wings shimmered like glass in the sunlight, then darted off again toward the lake. I looked out across the water. There were no footsteps behind me, no family voices, just the creak of the dock, the hum of the trees, the distant call of a bird I didn't recognize. Stillwater was breathing again, and so was I. I stood and walked toward the edge of the lake, taking the long way through the garden. The rosemary bushes had grown fuller since spring. The stepping stones were warm under my bare feet. As I passed the small wooden sign near the retreat entrance, I ran my fingers across the carved words. Stillwater belongs to those who listen. It no longer felt like a reminder. It felt like truth. Late that afternoon, Camille arrived. She stepped out of a compact silver car, no luggage, just a worn leather satchel slung across one shoulder. Her eyes were tired, her posture guarded, but in her hands she held a notebook. She walked toward the lake slowly, as if uncertain she was allowed to move so freely. When she reached the dock, she paused, looking out at the water the way Grandma used to, like she was listening for something beneath the ripples. I stepped onto the dock behind her. Camille turned. She looked surprised to see me, but not unsettled. She said, "Are you Lena?" "I am," I said. She nodded once, tight. "This place feels quiet." "That's the point," I said. Camille glanced down at her notebook. "I don't know if I'll be able to write anything." "You don't have to," I said. She exhaled, the kind that comes after holding your breath for months. We stood in silence for a moment longer. Then I gestured toward the porch. "Come in when you're ready," I said. "The kettle's on." Camille gave me a small, grateful smile. She didn't follow right away. She just sat on the edge of the dock, opened her notebook, and let the pages catch the wind. I turned and walked back toward the house. On the porch, I sat once more with Grandma's letter in my lap. I looked at the quilt draped over the back of the chair, the one I'd sewn from her old scarves. I thought of all the things I once believed about myself, that I was a failure, that I was weak, that I was invisible. But she never believed that, not for a second. She saw the whole of me long before I ever did, and when the world turned its back, she held the door open. I was never the failure. I was the only one who stayed. The sky turned gold again. Camille remained at the end of the dock, scribbling something in her notebook now. A heron glided low across the lake. The wind passed through the pines like a whisper. Stillwater stood strong, alive, exactly as she would have wanted it. I smiled to myself, folded the letter, and placed it gently back inside the book. Walked toward the lake, toward what was mine, toward who I had become. She knew who I was before I did, and now I do too.